today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. A last look at Tim Thibeault's upcoming fight with Mary Casamassa from right here in the United States, what will be Tim Thibeault's third professional bout. And I had my reservations about MVP putting her in there with an unbeaten fighter like herself in what is just her third professional bout, especially since Mary has more fights, and thus more rounds, more pro experience than young Tim Thibeault.
No relation to Tim.
But I actually had a look at Mary Casamassa, and having seen her in action, I do think that Tim will be able to handle this assignment, even if it seems ahead of schedule. And even though Mary has more pro fights than Tim Thibeault, I wouldn't say she has more talent than Tim Thibeault. In the two fights that I've seen of Tim, she already looks like a more put-together fighter than Mary Casamassa. Last in action in November of last year, opposite the ring amateur standout of Brazil, Adriana dos Santos Araujo. That's the crown jewel of Mary's resume so far. It's a decent scalp, I have to admit.
But I still think that Tim should be able to handle Mary when the time comes this Friday on the undercard of Taylor versus Serrano 3.
The reason for it, Tim Thibeault is a very statuesque middleweight as far as middleweights go. She's got a lot of height and a lot of length, noticeably a lot of power to boot, and good fundamentals, whereas Mary,
to do anything to Tam, she's gonna have to get close to her, and therein lies the dilemma. I saw the footage on Mary, and I have to say that when closing the distance, she is quite vulnerable.
The footage of her against Christiane Fahy, and how often Fahy was able to connect with punches as Mary tried to close the distance. Fahy was able to exhibit very good range control fighting off the back foot, though not having the same heavy artillery of a Tim Thibeault, those heavy hands. And so I figure that Tam can fight an even better version of that fight whilst doing more damage. And it's not much more difficult to get to Tam, because Tim Thibeault is a lot taller than a Christiane Fahy. She's a lot taller than a Mary Casamassa. In truth, Tam might be the tallest middleweight in the division right now, and one of the more well-schooled middleweights in the world at just 2-0.
I don't want to oversell her, but what I've seen from Tim Thibeault in her two professional bouts really blew me away. It impressed me because you have a well-schooled boxer and a great physical specimen that also happens to have a mean streak, a fighter that goes for the knockout, tries to hurt the other girl.
Because they're putting her in there with an unbeaten fighter like herself in what is just her third professional bout, a fighter that has more fights than she's got, that gives me the impression that they're moving her fast, and before you know it, Tam could be fighting for an alphabet title in the middleweight division, where two of them are vacant at this moment, the WBA and WBC titles.
Crawford.
There's really only one champion in the middleweight division right now, technically two. Desley Robinson of Australia holds both the IBF and WBO titles, and Clarissa Shields still holds the Ring magazine, but Clarissa's all the way up there at heavyweight, seemingly with no intentions of moving down.
If she's not willing to move down for Jadeja Green or a rematch with Savannah Marshall, I hardly think that Tam Thibeault is on her radar.
Leaving the door open for young Tam to dominate this division and become the most dominant force in it. I mean, I think that Tam Thibeault would beat Desley Robinson right now. She's got to beat Mary Casamassa first, and I think she's going to this weekend. Being honest, wouldn't be surprised if she stops Mary. Wouldn't be surprised if she knocks her out.
But Tam Thibeault is the pick, whether it's a decision or a cold knockout. I've got Tam beating Mary this weekend.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Stephen Kimothy, veteran boxing scribe and friend to the channel, asks, what's next for Top Rank? As the calendar turns to July, can you believe we are now halfway through the year? We look forward to a robust boxing schedule. There are plenty of meaningful matchups and big bouts upcoming. At the end of July, a show takes place from the theater at Madison Square Garden in New York. It's headlined by the vacant WBO junior middleweight title bout between Xander Zayas and Jorge Garcia. In chief support, is unbeaten up-and-comer Bruce Shoo Shoo Carrington. The show is notable because it is the last broadcast under the top-ranked ESPN union that began in 2017. It means that for the first time in decades, there will be no network in America that will regularly televise boxing. There was a time when it was a key piece of sports programming for the terrestrial networks ABC, CBS, and NBC, and then shifted more or less to the premium cable outlets HBO and Showtime. Throughout the years, ESPN has had various boxing series, such as Friday Night Fights, as have various regional cable channels. Fox Sports and Sports Channel and USA Network aired boxing in the past. Boxing has been a constant presence on the American television landscape for the better part of 8 decades. But after July 26th, that will come to an end for the time being. No, this isn't to bury boxing or a column talking about its impending doom, but just stating the facts. The reality is that more and more events and leagues are moving some of their games to streaming services. The difference is that while the NFL will air a game or 3 on Netflix on Christmas, the majority of their games are on Fox, CBS, ESPN, and NBC, essentially terrestrial networks. As of now, the biggest bouts in the United States are either on DAZN, a streaming platform that started operating in 2018, or pay-per-view. Amazon Prime has dabbled in boxing the last year or so with PBC. Netflix is said to be interested in acquiring more live sporting events, and they will be producing the September 12th showdown between Canelo and Terence Crawford. Looking at the current landscape, Matchroom Boxing is aligned with DAZN, as is Golden Boy Promotions. PBC is currently doing all of their cards on Prime. Basically, every major promoter has an exclusive broadcast partner that airs their content, except for Top Rank, after their next card. But Bob Arum doesn't sound too concerned.
We're working on it now. We've got to get the paperwork done, and we have the best agents. They're the ones that got us the ESPN deal. CAA. They're the ones working on a deal now.
While Arum and the rest of Top Rank brass has been tight-lipped about what is transpiring, there has been plenty of speculation over what is on the horizon. Everything from Top Rank having several broadcast entities, which the Bob father himself has stated, to them having an alliance with their arch-nemesis, PBC, has been brandied about. If this takes place, there may yet be hope in the Middle East. There are even rumors of ESPN still working with Top Rank in some fashion, but one thing to know about Top Rank and Bob Arum is that they have been incredibly resourceful over the years. A company that has been able to consistently evolve with the times and changing technology. What is taking place now is really nothing new to them. They did a weekly show with ESPN during the network's early years in the 80s, and then they had various partnerships with the likes of Versus, which was short-lived and rather forgettable, and True TV, which was also rather short-lived and forgettable, before landing back on ESPN. In between all of this, they had a regular set of cards on Telefutura with their Solo Boxeo series that was catered to their Spanish-speaking fan base and was an important outlet for their developing young talent. They would also have the occasional Showbox date, as that franchise launched back in 2001. Arum had relationships with both HBO and Showtime that could run both hot and cold depending on how many dates he would get from them and who was in charge. He wasn't above paying off one against the other to serve his own interests. Arum told me years ago that nothing ever really changes and nothing ever really stays the same. Right now, they are in a state of change, if not some uncertainty. For the time being, Top Rank will farm out some of their younger boxers onto other promoters' cards to keep them active. While it looks like they might go dark for the month of August, the hope is by the fall they will be back up and running. During the course of our conversation, I asked what would be next for Unified Bantamweight Champion Junto Nakatani and WBO Welterweight Champion Brian Norman, two boxers represented by Top Rank who had strong outings in the month of June. After all, it's not like they have ESPN slots waiting for them. Arum answered,
I wouldn't worry about future dates. We'll have plenty of them.
By early this week, it was reported that Brian Norman would be facing Heaven Daney in the fall, thanks to Turkey El Sheikh, and Arum tweeted about it, calling Devin Haney a track star. He. The last sentence shows the old guy still has plenty of piss and vinegar left in his tank. As for the rest of the top-ranked stable, Arum isn't too concerned about their future.
If you have a great product, you're not worried. We have great fighters and so forth, a great organization, and we have people interested in us, in our future. So I'm very confident.
I'll take the old guy at his word, because at Bob Arum's age, you ain't got time to waste with pleasantries. You speak in absolutes, and you speak from experience, as Bob Arum often does. Top Rank has been around for ages.
It's a big part of the reason I get the sense they're gonna land on their feet. This is not uncharted territory. It was a big deal when HBO, after so many years, decided to leave boxing, and Top Rank landed on their feet then, which makes me confident that they can land on their feet now.
It's an upcoming blackout in the month of August with the hope that Top Rank will be fully up and running by the fall, with perhaps more than one broadcast partner. And that's from the Bob father himself.
He's the one that said it.
What should we make of all of these major networks in the United States moving away from the sport of boxing? It is tantamount to the transition from 8-track tapes to cassettes, cassettes to CDs, CDs to MP3s, and subsequently streaming, which is where we are now.
And boxing's decline?
At least in this country, that all boils down to cultural changes, cultural differences. You will notice that the youth of this generation want to stay young, whereas before, boys dreamed about becoming men and whatever accented masculinity. These days, the boys want to stay boys, and some of them want to turn into girls. It's a generation that greatly lacks impulse control, and there is a direct correlation between that and the advent of the World Wide Web.
Anything you want is at your fingertips at the click of a button, and you can get it delivered to your door the next day.
Which has given rise to a younger generation greatly lacking any impulse control, mirroring the behaviors of a small child.
You notice that people are a lot more immature now than they used to be.
It has a palpable effect on the surrounding environment, how that pertains to boxing.
Not just boxing, but sports in general. Athletes are not the idols, the icons that they used to be. Now, those public figures are competing with influencers and streamers.
In tandem with the sport itself and its self-destructive nature, that didn't seem to do itself any favors the last decade or so. There's a lot of ways you can reconcile this.
A lot of moving parts.
What we are now entering into is a transitional phase until the next bright young star captivates the nation's imagination. This is a transitional period.
Over to this weekend's light heavyweight bout on the undercard of Berlanga versus Shiraz, the fight between David Morrell and unbeaten Imam Khataev.
Great addition to the card, a great addition to the show, but perhaps unappreciated because most Americans don't know Imam Khataev. They haven't seen him.
So let's get into it.
They will be a lot more familiar with Cuba's own David Morrell. David Morrell, they know David Morrell, who sports a professional record of 11 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 9 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 12 professional bouts, still coming off that points decision loss to David Benavidez.
A pressure fighter.
And you know who else is a pressure fighter? Imam Khataev is a pressure fighter with an unblemished record of 10 wins with no losses, no draws, 9 knockouts. Bit of a heavy hitter, at least at this level. Born in Russia, but based out of Sydney, Australia. Seems to get around. He's fought in his native Russia once or twice. He's fought in Canada at least 3 or 4 times. And of course, he's fought in Australia. Now he'll be fighting in New York. This will be his U.S. debut. Last in action earlier this year against Derval Palacio, who he won a unanimous decision against back in March. This fight with David Morrell, will be his second fight of this year.
Bitch!
It's not exactly the ideal comeback fight for David Morrell, but for a Cuban fighter based out of America, opportunities can be far and few, as they don't have that built-in fan base like the Puerto Ricans do or the Mexicans do. So you have to take your shot whenever it comes. Take opportunities as they come. And this is an opportunity for David Morrell. Now, it's an opportunity for Imam Khataev as well, because just imagine if he stops David Morrell where David Benavidez could not. So this is an opportunity for Imam, but it's also a step-up fight. He will be facing a fighter better than any fighter that he has faced so far. Best guy he's been in there with so far is Ricard Bolotnik's glorified gatekeeper. We stopped in 6. Is he gonna stop David Morrell on Saturday? I don't think so. Imam Khataev, who is the noticeably shorter, stumpier, stockier fighter of the two, doesn't seem as fast on his feet, as light on his feet, as David Morrell, who is best described as a boxer-puncher.
Where Imam is a pressure guy.
Yeah, usually when you get a pressure guy in there with a boxer-puncher, the boxer-puncher wins.
Then how did David Morrell lose to David Benavidez? Wasn't that the same kind of matchup?
It was in terms of styles, but in terms of experience, David Benavidez had a lot more experience than David Morrell. A lot more fights, a lot more rounds in the bank, that much more to draw from. That's where they were uneven, and that's why David Benavidez was able to beat him. Whereas this matchup, the fighters are on more even terrain. Imam Khataev is no more experienced than David Morrell. You could argue that David is more experienced than him. So they are on even terrain in terms of experience, and in terms of styles, David Morrell has the right style for the job to shake and bake Imam Khataev, who I think is the stronger puncher of the two, mid-range to inside, but for that to matter, he has to get there. And I think David Morrell isn't gonna let him.
That's what boxer punches do. Alternate from defense to offense, whereas pressure guys are mostly offense.
So for David Morrell, the taller, longer fighter of the two, it's not like he has to find Imam. Imam is going to find him, and all he has to do is hang back, stay behind the jab, set the traps, work off the counter. I don't know that he stops Imam Khataev.
David's power isn't certified at 175. He barely had any fights at 168.
So I'm going to go conservative for this one. I'm going to go with David Morrell to win a points decision in an action fight.
See if the prediction sticks.